Welcome to Casual Takes Only, where I give my very casual takes on what's going on in the MMA world. I am Rich, and let's get into it. Starting with the fights from this past weekend. Well, only two of the fights really that I'm actually going to talk about here. But yeah, I went 8-11 in my pick'ems, which is not very good. But then again, I went 7-12 at 305. So yeah, it's not been a great start to the YouTube journey from a picking perspective, but it is what it is. But yeah, let's first talk about the main event. Obviously, Jared Cannonier versus Borralho. This did not go anything like how I thought it would go. I did pick Jared Cannonier. I thought he would be too big, too strong, too clean on the feet. I thought he was the more precise puncher. I didn't think this fight would go to the ground, and if it did, I thought it would be because Borralho would get desperate and feel like he had to take him down. None of that happened. First of all, Borralho looked a lot bigger, or not a lot bigger, but he looked bigger than Cannonier in there. I don't know if that was just my brain doing something weird, or I just didn't realize how big Borralho was. But yeah, he looked bigger than I thought he did. I thought that stature-wise, Jared Cannonier was going to be the bigger man. Maybe I'm just getting fugazied by his time spent in heavyweight and having fought sort of skinnier guys more recently, like Izzy or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, he was not the bigger man, and he was not the cleaner puncher or striker on the feet. So yeah, that did not go how I expected. Borralho was clean, was snappy. I actually think there's maybe an element of Borralho where he sort of fights to the level of his opponent a little bit. Not totally. I mean, if you look at his fight against Paul Craig, for example, obviously he dominated that fight. But I feel like someone who was able to do this to Jared Cannonier should have been able to get Paul Craig out of there like pretty much instantly, right? Because the chasm in skill between those two guys on the feet is astronomical. But, he's undefeated for a reason. And yeah, he looked good. I didn't really learn anything new about him. I think when it comes to, apart from his height, I guess he's taller than I thought he was. Apparently he's 6'1". I thought he was like 5'11", so I learned that at least. But yeah, let's start with where these guys go from here with Cannonier. Obviously, Cannonier was ranked 5th in the middleweight division before this. This has not been updated yet, obviously, post-fight. I think it's fair to say that Jared Cannonier's career is over. That doesn't mean he'll never fight again, but he's not going to be in the title picture. He's 40 years old. He's just lost, so he's probably going to go down to, I don't know, 7th or something like that in the rankings. And there's just no way. Like, he'd probably need 2 or 3 fights to even be in contention for a title shot again. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So yeah, I think he's pretty much done. As I said, that he might fight again, but it'll be on a pick and choose basis. If I was his management, at least that's how I'd approach it. Like, do you want to keep fighting? If so, what kinds of fights? Maybe he's earned at least some kind of leeway with the UFC where he can pick some favorable, fun fights for himself. But if not, solid career, and yeah, probably time to quit before you get any brain damage would be my conventional wisdom. I understand that it's no one's right to tell a fighter when enough is enough. But yeah, I think he's donezo, basically. Whereas Borralho, who was obviously ranked 12 before this fight, that's a good solid win against a guy who's in the top 5. And now you kind of have to pair him against someone else who is the same rank or higher, really. Especially he's on this streak. He's obviously undefeated in the UFC. Is it 16 fights in a row or something now, including fights outside of the UFC? I believe his only loss was his second ever fight. So I think he's on a massive win streak. Plenty of finishes. And who do you pair him with? Obviously, we know Duplessis and Strickland, not that he'd be in the title picture at this point, but they're fighting each other. That is the next title fight at middleweight. Robert Whittaker's obviously got his fight booked with Hamzat. So, do you give him Izzy? I mean, you'd ask Izzy the question, I guess, if you wanted to, how he'd feel about that. For Izzy, fighting a guy who was ranked number 12, I'm going to assume Izzy's not going to want to take that fight. So then really the only name you have left is Imanov, which makes sense. I think that's a fight that makes sense. Has Borralho earned the right to fight like massive names? Probably not at this point. Has he earned the right to fight in a #1 contenders fight? Probably not. But he's well on his way, right? And he's still got time on his side. He's on this big win streak. So if he beats Imanov, I think that then sets him up to either fight the winner of Whittaker-Chimaev for that #1 contender spot, or more realistically, fight someone else who's going to have made their way into the picture by that point. Because what's going to happen is either Strickland or Duplessis will obviously win, and then that person is obligated to fight the winner of Robert Whittaker versus Chimaev, if you believe anything that Dana White says, which is a big if. That guy does change his mind quite a lot. So then it would be the fight after that you'd be aiming for. So you definitely have to fight someone else in the meantime. So for me, fight between Borralho and Imanov makes sense, and then see how the next few fights play out, and maybe he fights the loser of one of those matchups, right? I think that's something that could make sense, and then that will put him in the title window. So yeah, that's what I think is going to happen. And yeah, those are basically my main takeaways from the main event. Wish Jared Cannonier all the best. But yeah, I think it's difficult. I would probably suggest retiring at this point, unless you're doing it for the love of the sport, which is always a possibility. Also, from this card, the very first fight of the night is what intrigued me, because we have our very own Alex Pereira versus Izzy storyline in the women's divisions. Now, bear with me here. Bear with me, okay? This does make some kind of sense. So for anyone who doesn't know who this lady is, she is called Wang Kong. I believe that's how you pronounce it, though I'm probably wrong. And she used to be a professional kickboxer, a pretty good professional kickboxer. In fact, she is the last kickboxer to beat Valentina Shevchenko in kickboxing, which, in case you didn't know, is pretty impressive, because Valentina Shevchenko had 60 total kickboxing fights. She won 57 and only lost 3. And her last loss was to Miss Wang Kong. Here it is. In China by unanimous decision. That was her last fight. And look, you can see the streak she was on before. Crazy. So yeah, she is the real deal when it comes to striking. We all know how dominant a striker Valentina is in the UFC, and she fought against who she fought against. Who the hell did she fight against? Oh, Victoria Leonardo. Okay, which with a stunning record of 11 wins and 7 losses at this point, which is by the by. And she knocked her out in like a minute or something like that. Just caught her down the pipe with a 1-2, basically. So yeah, the reason why this obviously draws parallels to Alex versus Izzy is because she even mentioned, it was a narrative that they were sort of doing on the cast, that it's like, oh, is she gunning for Valentina? Bisping or whoever did the interview then asked her about it in the post-fight interview. And I can't remember what she said, but she said something along the lines of like, yeah, and I'll beat her in MMA too, or whatever. So it's very exciting. This girl is undefeated in MMA so far. She's one of the very few people in the women's divisions who you can actually watch a fight and think someone might get finished here, or knocked out at least. It's pretty seldom these days that we get finishes in the women's division unless they're like rear naked chokes or whatever. So it's nice to see someone with genuine knockout technique in the female divisions. And yeah, she's gunning for Valentina. And what I hope the UFC do is they give her a path where she just gets put against striker after striker, who's, probably not going to be quite as good as her at striking. And yeah, fast track her to the title. But let's make it interesting. I think that there are very few opportunities in the women's divisions to make really interesting storylines and title fights. And this is one of them. So I think the UFC should be coddling this girl. I think they should be really crafting a path by which she can meet Valentina, and yeah, hopefully set that fight up. It's sort of 18 months from now, if she's active, maybe 4 fights to sort of get her up the ladder. 3-4 fights. Yeah, I'd probably do 3, to be honest, if possible. Make that fight happen as soon as possible. So yeah, that's an interesting one, and definitely a young lady to keep an eye on. Now, elsewhere, Jiri Prochazka has been talking about going to middleweight again. Now, I don't really understand this on multiple levels. First of all, there seems to be some weird thing with like Duplessis. I don't know if this is with Duplessis or Adesanya, if they're like buddies or whatever, but he basically said if Izzy wins, he'll stay at 205, but if Duplessis wins, he'll go down and fight Duplessis. I'm not sure where that comes from, if they have beef or if he's friends with Izzy. I don't know. But either way, he's talked about going to middleweight before, and I hate it. I just hate it. He's not even a small middleweight. Small light heavyweight. He's a pretty big light heavyweight. He looks very similar in size, like when he fought Alex. In fact, probably has more, very similar height, probably has more mass than Alex. And the idea that he's going to cut down, I have no doubt that he would be able to cut down because he's this super, cerebral, disciplined guy who's probably going to sit in a shed for 3 weeks before the fight and eat nothing but drink water. But yeah, that's not really the point, is it? I think, especially when you've just been knocked out twice by Alex, arguably knocked out by him 3 times, right? Because when he gets caught with the left at the end of the first round, I'm pretty sure that like flash KO'd him, or at least probably gave him a concussion before he then gets head kicked. I don't really want to see a guy like that deplete himself all the way down to 185 to fight someone like Duplessis. Yeah, I think this is an absolutely terrible idea. I hope he is talked out of it or comes to his senses, because everyone loves Jiri. Jiri is a great guy. He's super entertaining as a fighter. He seems like, a really top guy, a top professional. And the last thing you want to see is him deplete himself, go down to middleweight, and then get knocked out there. Heaven forbid. So I just hate this. And I think if he has good people around him, this should not happen, in my opinion. Now, on the inverse, the talk of Alex Pereira going back to heavyweight is back again, this time through his coach, Glover, who has basically said, I want him to go to heavyweight. I think he has naturally carries the heavyweight power. I think he says, obviously he's going to say this, but he says, I think he can beat everyone at heavyweight. And yeah, I think it's like a natural step for him. Now, this obviously isn't news to anyone. One thing it obviously confirms is this whole Alex posting the sort of meme picture after the Duplessis Adesanya fight saying, oh, one more fight at 185 or whatever it was. I think he actually said one more time, or whatever it was, implying he was going to go down to 185. That's obviously not going to happen. He doesn't have any intention of doing that. That was clearly never going to happen. So yeah, that's been put to bed. And now it's just a question of whether or not he's going to go to heavyweight. Now, or probably more when he goes to heavyweight. Now, in my opinion, I think if he beats Khalil, he should fight Magomed. If Ank is willing to fight somewhere other than Abu Dhabi. Now, obviously, if Alex wants to fight him in Abu Dhabi, that's fine. But if there's any truth to this idea that Ank is basically holding that fight hostage, if you like, by saying he'll only fight in Abu Dhabi, screw him. Just screw him. Then you don't deserve it. You don't want it enough. Like, unless there's some complex visa issue that's preventing you from fighting anywhere else, that's just ridiculous. You're not the champion. You don't get to make these calls. So you don't deserve a title shot as far as I'm concerned. So I think Alex has 2 options. Either he beats, assuming he wins, if he beats Khalil, he can go straight to heavyweight and then fight sort of, well, he says it would only be for the title. I would like to see him fight a warm-up fight at heavyweight, but I guess if he goes to heavyweight, it's straight into a title fight. Or he can if he beats Khalil, he can then fight Magomed and then go to heavyweight. So, yeah, that's a sort of world's his oyster, see what happens, bridge cross when come to it kind of situation. But, yeah, I don't really have any other strong opinions on that, other than obviously I'm a massive fan of Alex, so I want to see him get a 3rd belt. I think that would be incredible. Probably the greatest achievement in the history of combat sports, or at least, I mean, it's really hard to gauge these things like across, like, I mean, you can never compare something like this to like Rumble in the Jungle or something, right? Like, it's just not, there's not a proper equivalency, but you know what I mean? At least in MMA, this would be the greatest achievement ever in MMA. So I'd love to see him do it, or at least try it. I think even trying it would be amazing, but whether he does or not, we'll have to see. When Alex does his more sort of serious sit-down videos and talks about it, he speaks about how, you know, 205 is his division and he needs to look after his division and he's comfortable and happy in his division and he needs to defend the belt there. So I wouldn't even be surprised if Alex just stayed at 205 or at least had like 3 fights and then maybe he has like some kind of retirement plan. I think that's quite likely as well. Like maybe his retirement plan is that his last fight, age like 38 and a half or something, is at heavyweight. So he'll like defend the belt. He'll then fight Ankalaev. Maybe he has one more fight against a Rakic or someone like that. And then has like one last bang super fight, like all or nothing at heavyweight, and win or lose, he retires. I think that's also a very likely scenario as well. That would be like the ultimate, well, Cinderella story is not really, the ultimate sort of anime arc, if you like. So yeah, I think that's very likely. But anyway, yeah, that's all my thoughts on the topics of the day. So I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, then please feel free to like and subscribe. And I will see you next time.